The colony of Haven's Reach sat on a quiet moon called Talos 9, far from the busy trade lanes of the galaxy. It was a small human settlement, home to about 40,000 people. Most of them were farmers, engineers, and teachers who had left Earth to build a simpler life. The moon had thin silver rivers, wide green fields under a dome of clear sky glass, and soft winds that smelled like rain. Children played in the streets. Old men sat outside cafes and talked about crops and weather. It was peaceful. It was ordinary. And that made it the perfect target. The Korathi Dominion did not know much about humans. They had heard stories, of course. Every species in this part of the galaxy had heard stories about Earth. But stories were just noise to the Korathi. They were a proud people, insect-like in shape, with hard shells and 6 eyes that could see in the dark. They had conquered 11 star systems in the last century alone. They believed strength was the only law that mattered. And humans, as far as they could tell, were young, soft, and slow to grow. A new species. An easy target. Fleet Commander Urvekt Thas did not expect a real fight when he brought his ships to Talos 9. He had studied the reports from Korathi scouts. Haven's Reach had no shields around its cities. It had no orbital defense platforms. It had only a small number of unarmed transport ships, and one aging patrol cruiser that was more of a museum piece than a warship. To Urvekt, this looked like an easy conquest. A colony ripe for the taking. A resource point that could feed the hungry engines of the Dominion's war machine. He brought 12 warships. That was more than enough. In truth, he only needed 3. But Urvekt liked to make a statement. He liked the idea that when a Korathi fleet appeared in the sky, there would be no doubt, no room for resistance, no chance that anyone below could think they had a chance to fight back. Fear was a weapon, and Urvekt used it well. The first sign of trouble on Talos 9 came just after dawn. A farmer named Elion Cho was walking through his wheat field when he saw strange lights blinking above the clouds. At first he thought it might be a meteor shower, something beautiful to tell his children about at dinner. But the lights did not fall. They grew brighter. They grew larger. And then the sky itself seemed to open, as 12 dark shapes broke through the clouds and hung silently above the colony like great predatory birds. Within minutes, alarms sounded across Haven's Reach. Governor Talia Reyes, the elected leader of the colony, rushed to the small communication center that had been built into the town hall. She had never expected to use it for anything more serious than a supply request. Now her hands shook as she opened a channel toward Earth. The signal would take hours to arrive, she knew, because Talos 9 was far from the heart of human space. But she had to try. It was the only thing she could do. "This is Governor Talia Reyes, of Haven's Reach Colony, Talos 9, she said, her voice tight but steady. "We have unknown ships in orbit. 12 vessels, unfamiliar design, no communication attempts. We are not a military colony. We have almost no defenses. If anyone receives this message, please send help. We do not know what is happening. We are afraid." She did not know if anyone would hear her in time. She sent the message anyway, because hope, even a small and desperate hope, was still hope. Above the colony, Urvekt studied the small human settlement through his ship's sensors. His officers reported no significant weapons, no shield generators, no orbital defense of any kind. It was, in his eyes, almost an insult. He had prepared for battle and found only farmers. Some of his crew members even laughed. They joked that humans must be a weak and foolish species, unworthy of their fear, unworthy of respect. Urvekt gave the order. The bombardment began without warning. Beams of energy tore through the sky-glass domes that protected the colony's main cities. Buildings that had stood for 20 years crumbled into fire and dust in seconds. The old patrol cruiser tried to rise and fight, its captain choosing to stand and die rather than run. But it was destroyed before it even cleared the atmosphere. There was no real battle. There was only destruction, swift and total, raining down from ships that faced no true resistance. Governor Reyes stayed at her post until the very end. She kept sending pieces of information back toward Earth, hoping that even broken data, even a few final images, might help someone understand what had happened here. She recorded the ship's shapes. She recorded their weapon patterns. She recorded the last words of colonists who huddled with her in the shelter beneath the town hall, waiting for the end that was already coming for them. "Tell Earth," she whispered into the microphone, as the walls around her began to shake. "Tell them we did not start this. Tell them who did this to us. The transmission cut off a few seconds later, along with everything else on Talus 9. By the time the sun set over the ruins of Haven's Reach, the colony was gone. Not damaged, not weakened, gone. Fires still burned in the wreckage of what had once been homes and schools and gardens. The skyglass domes lay shattered across the fields like broken glass ornaments. 40,000 people who had built a simple, peaceful life on a quiet moon were now silent forever. Urvecht watched the destruction from his command ship with satisfaction. To him, this was not a tragedy. It was a demonstration. It was proof of Karathi power. He ordered his fleet to remain in orbit for a short time, both to confirm there were no survivors capable of resistance, and to allow his officers to record the victory for the Dominion's histories. He wanted this moment remembered. He wanted every species in the region to know that when the Karathi arrived, resistance was pointless, and mercy was not part of their nature. "Send word to the home fleet," Urvecht told his communications officer, a smaller Karathi named Yshel Dorn. "Tell them Talus 9 has fallen. Tell them the human colony is destroyed. Tell them we found no meaningful defense, and the conquest was easy. This will please the High Command." Yshel hesitated for only a moment. She had noticed something strange in the final minutes of the attack, something she could not quite explain. A brief flicker on her sensors, a faint signal moving away from the planet at a strange angle, unlike anything she expected from a dying colony with no advanced technology. It was gone before she could study it properly, and she told herself it was nothing important, just background noise from the destruction below. She sent the report to the home fleet as ordered, describing the victory in simple, proud words, just as her commander wanted. What she did not know, what none of the Karathi fleet at Talus 9 understood, was that Haven's Reach had never truly been undefended. It had never been the isolated, forgotten colony they believed it to be. Its lack of visible weapons was not weakness, it was disguise. And the flicker Yshel saw on her sensors was not noise. It was the very beginning of something the Karathi Dominion could never have imagined. Far from Talus 9, deep within the more secure and heavily guarded regions of human space, a very different kind of alert had already been triggered. Long before the first shot was fired at Haven's Reach, Earth's outer sensor network had detected the approach of unknown ships toward the Talus 9 system. Humanity, still young among the stars compared to species like the Karathi, had learned hard lessons over its own bloody history. Wars between nations, wars between ideas, centuries of conflict on their own world, had taught humans one lesson above all others. Never assume peace is guaranteed, and never leave a colony truly undefended, even if it looks that way from the outside. Haven's Reach had no visible weapons, because Earth had chosen it as a special kind of colony. It was what Earth's military called a quiet outpost, a settlement placed deliberately at the edge of known space, watched closely by hidden systems that no outside scanner could easily detect. Sensor buoys disguised as space debris drifted in the system's outer edges. A deep space monitoring station, cloaked and silent, sat far beyond the colony's moon, recording everything that entered or left the system. And most importantly, tucked away in the folds of nearby space, invisible to Karathi scanners, a single advanced human vessel had been quietly observing the region for months, gathering information, waiting, watching, exactly as it had been trained to do. That ship was the reason for the strange flicker Yshel Dorn had noticed and dismissed. In the final moments before Talus 9's destruction, it had received a burst transmission from the colony itself, an automatic signal triggered by Governor Reyes's emergency broadcast. The ship's onboard systems immediately recorded every detail of the Karathi attack. The number of enemy vessels, their weapon signatures, their flight patterns, even fragments of their internal communications picked up through careful signal interception. It compiled all of this information into a single compressed data package. Then, without any command needed from a human crew, following protocols written years earlier by Earth's highest military minds, it prepared to send that information exactly where it needed to go. Not back to Earth first. Not to a nearby human fleet. The ship sent its message directly toward the one place the Karathi would least expect, their own home fleet, waiting far away at the heart of Karathi space, around their capital world, protected by walls of warships and generations of belief in their own power. 3 hours. That was how long it would take for the signal to cross the vast distance between Talus 9 and the Karathi homeworld through the hidden relay points human engineers had secretly mapped out over years of quiet exploration. 3 hours for a single short message, carrying no threats, no demands, and no anger, to arrive among the most powerful ships the Karathi Dominion possessed. Back at Talos 9, Urvekt gave the order to withdraw his fleet, satisfied with his victory. He believed the matter was finished. He believed Haven's Reach was simply another conquered world to add to the long list of Karathi triumphs. He had no idea that somewhere far beyond his sight, a message was already crossing the stars, one that would soon reach his own people's greatest fleet, and change everything they believed about the species they had just destroyed. As the Karathi ships turned away from the smoking ruins of Haven's Reach, none of them looked back to see the tiny, silent human vessel slip further into the shadows of deep space, its work already done. It did not follow them. It did not need to. It simply waited, quiet and unseen, as its message raced ahead through the darkness, carrying with it the first true warning the Karathi Dominion would ever receive about the true nature of humanity. They had expected fear. They had expected silence, or perhaps a plea for peace, some small colony, begging not to be destroyed further. What they did not expect, what none of them could have imagined as they returned home certain of their victory, was that Earth's answer to the death of Haven's Reach would arrive at their own doorstep before their own fleet commander had even finished writing his victory report. 3 hours after the destruction of Haven's Reach, the Karathi home fleet, resting peacefully in orbit around their sacred capital world, received a single signal from Earth. It was short, it was calm, and it would be remembered by every Karathi who survived what came next, as the moment their entire understanding of the galaxy began to break apart. The Karathi home fleet rested in orbit above Korath Prime, the ancient capital world of the Dominion. It was the largest gathering of warships the Karathi possessed, a wall of steel and weapons meant to guard the heart of their empire. Hundreds of vessels floated in careful formation above the planet's golden clouds, their hulls catching the light of the twin suns that warmed Korath Prime. This fleet had never lost a battle. It had never even fought one, not truly, because no enemy had ever dared to bring a war to the Karathi capital itself. It existed mostly as a symbol, a reminder to every species in the region that the heart of the Dominion could never be touched. Fleet Marshal Dros Kalin commanded this fleet from his flagship, the Ashclaw, a vessel larger than most cities on smaller worlds. He was an old warrior, respected among his people for both his patience and his ruthlessness. He had spent decades studying the weaknesses of every species the Karathi had ever conquered, and he took pride in believing there was very little left in the galaxy that could surprise him. It was a quiet afternoon on the Ashclaw, 3 hours after Urvekt's fleet had begun its attack on Talos 9, though of course no one on the flagship knew that yet. Dros Kalin was reviewing reports about grain shipments and shipyard repairs, mundane tasks that filled most of his days now that peace, or at least Karathi peace, had settled over this part of space. It was his communications officer, a sharp young Karathi named Vesia Thray, who first noticed something strange appear on her monitoring station. "Marshal," she said, her voice careful, "we have received an incoming transmission. Origin, human space." Dros Kalin looked up slowly. Human space was far from Korath Prime, farther than almost any communication should reasonably reach, without months of relay delay. "From Earth?" he asked, more curious than concerned. "That is a long way to send a message. What do they want? Trade complaints? A formal protest about our colonization efforts?" The Dominion had, of course, heard rumors that a human colony existed somewhere near their borders. Urvekt's fleet had been sent specifically to deal with it, though Dros Kalin had not expected any real response from Earth so soon, if ever. Most species took weeks or months to even notice when their border colonies vanished, let alone respond in any meaningful way. "It is not a message in the traditional sense," Vesia said, studying her screen with a growing frown. "It is very short. It does not appear to be diplomatic in nature. And Marshal, the origin point is strange. It did not come from Earth directly. It came from a relay point much closer to us than it should be possible for humans to reach." That caught Dros Kalin's attention. "Closer? How close?" "The signal passed through a relay, less than 1 hour's travel time. From Korath Prime itself," Vesia answered, her voice tightening slightly. "That would mean humans have technology capable of transmitting messages through hidden relay points, inside, or very near, our own territory. We have detected no such installations before now." A murmur passed through the bridge crew. Dross Kalin felt something shift inside him, a small crack in his usual calm confidence. "Play the message," he ordered. Vesia's claws moved carefully over her console. A moment later, a voice filled the bridge of the Ashclaw. It was calm. It was clear, and it spoke perfect Korathi, without any trace of translation software struggling to find the right words, which in itself was unsettling, since very few outside species had ever bothered to learn the Korathi language fluently. "This is a message from Earth Fleet Command," the voice said. "At 0600 hours today, forces under Fleet Commander Vect Thas attacked and destroyed the civilian colony of Haven's Reach on Talos 9. 40,000 human civilians are dead. There was no military presence at that colony capable of threatening your forces. There was no warning given. There was no attempt at communication before the attack began." The bridge crew fell completely silent. Even Dross Kalin, a warrior who had heard reports of destroyed worlds many times in his long career, felt a strange chill settle over him. It was not the content of the message that disturbed him most. Colonies were destroyed all the time in the endless cycle of conquest across the galaxy. What disturbed him was the tone. There was no anger in the voice, there was no fear. There was only a flat, patient certainty, the sound of someone stating a simple fact rather than making a threat. The message continued. "Earth does not consider this matter closed. Earth has never considered such matters closed. You have 12 ships currently withdrawing from Talos 9, under Fleet Commander Vect Thas. Those ships will not reach Korathi space again." Vesia looked up sharply from her console, her eyes wide. "Marshal, that statement. It implies those ships are already—" "I am aware of what it implies," Dross Kalin said sharply, cutting her off, though his own voice had lost some of its usual steadiness. The message was not finished. "This transmission is being received by the Korathi home fleet at Korath Prime. You are receiving this message roughly 3 hours after the attack on Haven's Reach began. You are receiving it because Earth wanted you to understand something before you learn it through any other means." There was a brief pause in the recording, as if whoever had prepared this message wanted that fact to sink in fully before continuing. "Humanity does not send warnings before we defend ourselves. We do not need to. This message is not a warning. It is a courtesy, offered once, so that you may understand what is coming and why. You destroyed a colony you believed to be defenseless. You were wrong. Every human colony beyond Earth is watched, is protected, and is connected to systems capable of responding faster than most species believe possible. What you saw at Haven's Reach was not weakness, it was disguise. It was the same disguise every human colony wears, so that species like yours will make exactly the mistake you have made today." Dross Kalin's claws tightened against the arm of his command chair. Around him, his officers exchanged uneasy glances, some clearly frightened, others simply confused, unable to fully process what they were hearing. The recording continued in its same calm, unhurried tone. 3 hours ago, Earth Fleet Command authorized a response to the attack on Haven's Reach. That response has already been in motion since before this message began transmitting. You will not need to search for it. It will not hide from you. It is already closer to Korath Prime than your sensors currently believe possible, and it will make itself known very soon. Silence fell across the bridge once more. Vesia's hands hovered over her controls, uncertain what to do next. Dross Kalin stared at the display where the message had played, his mind working quickly, trying to fit this information into everything he understood about warfare, about strategy, about the galaxy he had spent his whole life studying. "This is a bluff," he said finally, though his voice carried less confidence than his words suggested. "Humans are young. They have no fleet capable of reaching this deep into our territory without our detection systems noticing something. This message is meant to frighten us, nothing more. A clever trick, designed to make us hesitate." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. If it truly was a bluff, why send it at all? Why reveal that Talos 9 had been destroyed only 3 hours ago, when Urvek's fleet had not yet even reported back with the news themselves? How could Earth possibly know the exact timing of the attack, unless they had some way of watching it happen in real time? And if humans truly had eyes and ears this deep inside Korathi territory, without ever being detected, what else might they be capable of that the Dominion had never imagined? "Marshal," Vesia said quietly, breaking into his thoughts, "we have not yet received any communication from Fleet Commander Urvekt, confirming the attack on Talos 9. According to our own records, His fleet should still be several hours away from being able to send a full report back to us through normal channels. Dross Kalen's eyes narrowed. That detail troubled him more than anything else in the strange human message. If Urvek's own fleet had not yet reported anything, then how did Earth already know precise details, including the exact hour the attack had begun, and the number of civilian casualties? Either the humans had access to information they should not possess, watching events unfold from somewhere close to Talos 9 itself, or something even stranger was happening, something Dross Kalen could not yet fully explain. "Order all sensor arrays around Korath Prime to full alert," he commanded, standing from his chair. "Scan every corner of this system. If there is even the smallest human vessel anywhere near us, I want it found immediately." The bridge crew rushed to follow his orders, screens flashing with rapid sensor sweeps across the space surrounding Korath Prime. Minutes passed in tense silence as reports came back one after another. Nothing. No unusual readings. No unfamiliar ship signatures. No sign of any hidden fleet lurking nearby, waiting to strike. For a brief moment, some of the tension on the bridge began to ease. Perhaps the humans had lied. Perhaps this was exactly the kind of trick a younger, weaker species might attempt, hoping fear alone could accomplish what actual military strength could not. But Dross Kalen did not relax. He had spent too many years studying patterns of warfare to dismiss a threat simply because it had not yet revealed itself. He thought carefully about what he knew of humanity, the scattered reports collected over the years by Korathi scouts and traders who had encountered human ships in more distant regions of space. Humans, according to those reports, had a strange habit that other species found difficult to understand. They rarely announced their strength before using it. They preferred quiet preparation over open displays of power, patience over impulsiveness, calculation over blind aggression. It was a strategy built from centuries of their own violent history, a history filled with wars, fought not through simple displays of force, but through careful planning, hidden movements, and decisive, overwhelming strikes, delivered at precisely the right moment. "Marshal," Vesia said suddenly, her voice trembling slightly, "I am picking up something. It is faint, but it looks like a very small, very brief energy signature near the outer edge of our system. It appeared for less than a second, and then vanished completely." Dross Kalen felt his chest tighten. "Where exactly?" Vesia's claws moved quickly across her console, pulling up coordinates. "Just beyond our outermost patrol perimeter, Marshal, in an area our long-range scouts consider completely empty." For the first time since receiving the strange human message, Dross Kalen felt real fear settle into his ancient bones. If something had truly been there, close enough to their own capital world to be detected even briefly, and quiet enough to remain hidden until that single flicker, then perhaps the humans had not been bluffing after all. Perhaps everything the message described, the disguise of weakness at Haven's Reach, the quiet response already set into motion, the claim that Urvek's fleet would never return home, was not a trick meant to frighten a proud and powerful species. Perhaps it was simply the truth. "Recall every ship from long-range patrol," Dross Kalen ordered, his voice sharper now, edged with something close to genuine alarm. "Bring the entire home fleet to full readiness. I want every weapon system online, and every shield generator at maximum output, within the next 10 minutes. As his officers scrambled to follow his commands, Dross Kalen stared silently at the empty space beyond Korath Prime's golden clouds, wondering, for the first time in his long and confident career, whether the Korathi Dominion had made a terrible mistake in believing they understood the true nature of the species they had just attacked. Far away from Korath Prime, deep within the quiet halls of Earth Fleet Command on the outskirts of Sol System, Admiral Renata Voss stood before a large display showing the slow, patient movement of ships across a section of star charts most humans had never even heard of. She had been awake for nearly 18 hours, but her expression showed no sign of tiredness, only focus. Only calm, careful attention to a plan that had been years in the making. To understand what was happening now, one had to understand something about how Earth had chosen to survive among the stars. When humanity first began expanding beyond its own solar system centuries ago, it quickly discovered that the galaxy was neither empty nor kind. Other species existed, some peaceful, many others openly hostile, most simply indifferent to the survival of a young species with no history of true interstellar warfare. Early human colonies were sometimes raided, sometimes destroyed outright, by species who saw expansion into new star systems as a race to claim resources before anyone else could. Humanity learned very quickly that spreading among the stars without proper protection was an invitation for disaster. But humans also carried with them thousands of years of hard experience in warfare, diplomacy, deception, and survival. Their own planet's history was filled with empires rising and falling, wars fought over land and resources, alliances formed and broken, and lessons learned again and again about the cost of underestimating an enemy or being underestimated by one. When humanity finally reached the stars in force, they carried all of that painful wisdom with them. Earth Fleet Command decided early on that visible strength alone was not enough to protect a young, still developing civilization. A show of force could provoke stronger, more established powers into striking first, out of fear or jealousy. Instead, Earth adopted a different strategy, one built around patience, misdirection, and careful preparation. Colonies at the edges of human space, especially small, vulnerable ones like Haven's Reach, were deliberately left looking undefended. No visible weapons, no obvious military presence. Just quiet, ordinary settlements, filled with farmers and workers, exactly the kind of easy target an ambitious, aggressive species might choose to attack without much thought. But behind that appearance of vulnerability, Earth built an invisible web of protection. Sensor networks, disguised as harmless debris. Deep space monitoring stations hidden using advanced stealth technology, developed over decades of careful research. And most importantly, mobile response fleets, small in number but extremely capable, positioned quietly near likely trouble spots long before any attack ever occurred. This was the doctrine that Admiral Voss had helped design many years earlier, back when she was still a young officer eager to prove that humanity's history of conflict could be turned into wisdom rather than repeated mistakes. She called it, simply, the quiet answer doctrine. Never let an attack against a human colony go unanswered. Never assume an enemy understood the true cost of their aggression until it was clearly, undeniably shown to them. And most importantly, always be ready to respond the moment danger appeared, rather than scrambling to react only after the damage was already done. When Korathi scout ships had first been detected quietly observing the outer regions near Talos 9 several months earlier, Earth's intelligence networks immediately flagged the activity as a potential threat. Patterns in the scout ship's movement matched behavior Earth had already seen from other aggressive species preparing for an invasion. Rather than reinforcing Haven's Reach with obvious defenses, which might have only delayed an attack rather than preventing it entirely, Admiral Voss made a different decision. She authorized the deployment of a single advanced stealth cruiser, the ESS Quiet Resolve, to monitor the situation from deep cover, while simultaneously preparing a larger hidden response fleet much closer to Korathi territory itself. It was a calculated gamble, one that still troubled Admiral Voss even now. Allowing an attack to happen at all meant accepting that human lives would almost certainly be lost. It was not a decision made lightly, nor one she was proud of. But experience had taught Earth Fleet Command a harsh lesson. Species like the Korathi rarely respected diplomacy or warnings alone. They respected consequences, and the only way to teach a lasting lesson, one that would truly protect future human colonies from suffering the same fate, was to allow the attack to happen, then respond so swiftly and so overwhelmingly that no aggressor would ever consider attacking a human colony again. It was a brutal calculation, built from painful necessity rather than cruelty. Admiral Voss had personally reviewed every detail of the plan, understanding fully what it meant for the people of Haven's Reach. She had not slept well in the weeks leading up to the attack, knowing innocent lives were likely to be lost, no matter how carefully her fleet prepared to respond. But she also understood, from centuries of hard-earned human history, that sometimes protecting the future required accepting terrible losses in the present, as painful as that truth was to accept. When the attack on Haven's Reach finally began, exactly as intelligence reports had predicted, the response fleet Earth had secretly positioned near Korathi territory, received its activation signal almost immediately. This fleet was small compared to the massive Korathi home fleet, resting above Korath Prime, consisting of only 6 vessels. But these were not ordinary ships. They were among the most advanced warships humanity had ever built, equipped with stealth technology far beyond anything the Karathi had ever encountered, weapon systems capable of striking with devastating precision, and crews specifically trained for exactly this kind of high-stakes, high-risk mission. This fleet, known simply as Task Force Quiet Resolve, named after the stealth cruiser that had first detected the threat, was commanded by Vice Admiral Marcus Cade, a veteran officer known throughout Earth Fleet Command for his calm, methodical approach to combat. Unlike Fleet Marshal Dros Kalin, who commanded through fear and raw power, Cade commanded through discipline, patience, and absolute confidence in the careful planning behind every mission he undertook. "Confirm status of Task Force Quiet Resolve," Admiral Voss said calmly, standing before the star charts at Earth Fleet Command. A young communications officer nearby checked her console quickly. "Admiral, Task Force Quiet Resolve is holding position exactly as planned, 3 light minutes from Korath Prime, fully cloaked. Vice Admiral Cade reports all systems ready. He is awaiting your final authorization to proceed." Admiral Voss studied the star charts silently for a long moment. She thought once more of Haven's Reach, of the 40,000 people who had lived there, of Governor Reyes's final message describing her colonists' fear and confusion in their last moments of life. It was a heavy weight to carry, knowing that her own careful strategy had allowed such suffering to occur. But she also knew that this moment, right now, was the entire point of years of preparation. This was the moment when Earth's quiet, patient strategy would finally prove its worth, sending an unmistakable message not just to the Korathi Dominion, but to every other species watching from the shadows of the galaxy, wondering whether humanity truly deserved the fear and respect that rumors alone had begun to build around them. "Send the authorization," Admiral Voss said finally, her voice steady, despite the enormous weight of the decision. "Tell Vice Admiral Cade that Task Force Quiet Resolve is cleared to proceed with Operation Silent Answer." The order traveled instantly through secure human communication channels, reaching the hidden fleet near Korath Prime within moments. Aboard his flagship, the ESS Warden's Oath, Vice Admiral Marcus Cade received the authorization calmly, exactly as he had expected he would. "All ships, this is Vice Admiral Cade," he announced over the fleet's internal communication system. "We have received authorization to proceed with Operation Silent Answer. I want everyone to remember exactly why we are here today. 3 hours ago, the Korathi Dominion attacked and destroyed a peaceful human colony, killing 40,000 innocent civilians who never posed any threat to them. They believed we would be too slow, too weak, or too disorganized to respond in any meaningful way. Today, we are going to show them exactly how wrong that belief truly was." Across the 6 ships of Task Force Quiet Resolve, crews moved quickly and quietly to their battle stations, each of them fully aware of the historic responsibility resting on their shoulders. This would not be a battle of overwhelming numbers. It would be a battle of precision, discipline, and absolute confidence in humanity's carefully developed technology and strategy. "Cloak status remains stable," reported Lieutenant Commander Elena Ruiz, the ship's tactical officer aboard the Warden's Oath. "Karathi sensor sweeps continue to detect nothing beyond minor background noise. Their home fleet appears to be increasing readiness levels slightly, but they have not detected our actual position." Vice Admiral Cade nodded slowly, watching a detailed tactical display showing the massive Korathi home fleet resting in orbit above Korath Prime. Hundreds of warships, each individually powerful, sat gathered together in a formation built more for intimidation than genuine combat readiness. It was, Cade thought quietly to himself, exactly the kind of overconfident arrangement one would expect from a species that had never truly faced a serious challenge to their power. "Begin final targeting calculations," Cade ordered. "Focus priority on their primary command vessels, shipyard facilities, and defensive weapon platforms. We are not here to destroy their entire fleet outright. We are here to demonstrate exactly how vulnerable they truly are, and to make absolutely certain they understand the cost of what they did to Haven's Reach." As Task Force Quiet Resolve quietly prepared for what would soon become known throughout the galaxy as one of the most decisive and unexpected strikes in recorded history, aboard the Ashclaw, Fleet Marshal Dros Kalin continued desperately searching for answers, unaware that the very threat he feared was already hovering silently just beyond his fleet's furthest sensors, patiently waiting for the precise moment to reveal itself. Aboard the Ashclaw, tension had grown thick enough to feel in the air itself. Fleet Marshal Dros Kalin paced slowly across his bridge, his 6 eyes scanning report after report, none of which offered any clear answers. The brief energy signature detected earlier had not reappeared. Sensor sweeps across the entire system continued to find nothing unusual, and yet, something deep in his instincts, honed by decades of warfare and command, told him that danger was closer than his instruments could currently prove. "Marshal," Vesia Thray called out from her station, her voice carrying a fresh edge of urgency. "We have finally received a transmission from Fleet Commander Vect Thas. It appears to be delayed and somewhat garbled, but I believe I can clean up the signal." "Play it," Dros Kalin ordered immediately. The recording that followed was rough, filled with static and interruptions, clearly recorded under stressful conditions. Vect's voice came through in broken fragments. "Home Fleet, this is Thas. Talus 9 operation complete. Colony destroyed as planned, encountered no meaningful resistance. However, during our withdrawal, we detected unusual energy readings, possible cloaked vessel shadowing our fleet, attempting evasive." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by silence. "Re-establish contact with Fleet Commander Thas immediately," Dros Kalin ordered sharply. Vesia's claws moved quickly across her console, attempting repeatedly to reconnect with Vect's fleet. After several long, tense moments, she looked up, her expression grim. "Marshal, I am unable to re-establish any contact with Fleet Commander Thas, or any vessel under his command. Their last known transponder signals have all gone silent." A heavy, uncomfortable silence settled across the bridge of the Ashclaw. Dros Kalin felt a cold certainty settle into his chest, the kind of certainty that came only from decades spent recognizing the signs of a battle already lost, before it had even fully begun. The human message had said Vect's fleet would not return to Karathi space. It seemed increasingly likely that this warning had already come true. "All hands, maximum alert," Dros Kalin commanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through the growing fear spreading across his bridge crew. "I want every weapon system charged and ready. I want every shield generator at full power. Whatever is out there, we will not be caught unprepared." But preparation, it turned out, would not be enough. 3 light minutes away, aboard the ESS Warden's Oath, Vice Admiral Marcus Cade received final confirmation that Task Force Quiet Resolve's targeting calculations were complete. Every ship in his small fleet had spent the last several minutes carefully mapping the exact location of the Karathi home fleet's most valuable targets: command vessels, weapon platforms, shipyard facilities, and critical defense systems. "All ships, report readiness," Cade ordered calmly. One by one, each vessel confirmed full readiness, their voices steady, despite the enormous stakes of what was about to happen. 6 ships, cloaked and hidden, prepared to strike at a fleet numbering in the hundreds, relying entirely on precision, surprise, and humanity's carefully developed technology to achieve what raw numbers alone never could. "Decloak on my mark," Cade ordered. "Fire the moment our systems are visible. I want maximum damage delivered in the first 10 seconds of this engagement, before their fleet has any real chance to organize an effective response." The bridge of the Warden's Oath fell into focused silence as the final countdown began. Cade thought briefly of Haven's Reach, of Governor Reyes's final recorded words, of the 40,000 innocent lives lost simply because a proud, aggressive species had assumed weakness where none truly existed. This strike would not undo that tragedy. Nothing could. But it would ensure, as clearly and decisively as possible, that such an assumption about humanity would never be made again, not by the Karathi, and not by any other species watching closely from the shadows of the wider galaxy. "Mark," Cade said quietly. Task Force Quiet Resolve decloaked instantly, appearing without warning, directly among the outer edges of the massive Karathi home fleet. Before Karathi sensors could even fully register the sudden appearance of 6 unfamiliar vessels, human weapons systems opened fire with devastating precision. Beams of concentrated energy tore through the hulls of 3 Karathi command vessels almost simultaneously, disabling their communication and coordination systems before their crews even understood what was happening. Precision strikes targeted key shipyard facilities orbiting Korath Prime, destroying critical repair and resupply infrastructure in swift, decisive bursts. Defensive weapon platforms, meant to protect the capital world from any conceivable threat, were struck one after another with pinpoint accuracy. their crews caught completely off guard by an attack seemingly appearing from nowhere. Aboard the Ashclaw, alarms exploded into deafening chaos as reports flooded in from every direction. Multiple vessels detected at extremely close range. Unknown origin. They were not there a moment ago, one officer shouted. Command vessel Ironclaw has lost all communication. Heavy damage reported, another added. Shipyard Alpha is under direct attack. Defensive platforms 3 and 7 are offline. Dros Kalen stared at his tactical display in stunned disbelief as 6 small human vessels moved with terrifying precision through the heart of his once untouchable fleet, striking exactly where it hurt most, disabling command and coordination before a proper counterattack could even be organized. Return fire, he bellowed, fighting to keep his voice steady despite the shock coursing through him. All ships, target those vessels immediately. But even as Korathi ships scrambled to respond, they found themselves struggling against an enemy far more advanced than anything they had ever encountered. Human ships moved with impossible speed and precision, their shields absorbing incoming Korathi weapons fire with far greater efficiency than expected, while their own weapons continued delivering devastating, carefully targeted strikes against key Korathi assets. Vice Admiral Cade watched calmly from the bridge of the Warden's Oath as tactical displays showed the chaos spreading rapidly through the Korathi fleet. Continue focus strikes on command and coordination systems, he ordered. Avoid unnecessary civilian casualties on the surface of Korath Prime itself. Our target is their military capability, not their population. This careful restraint was deliberate, part of the same doctrine that had guided Earth's entire strategy from the very beginning. Humanity was not seeking to annihilate the Korathi Dominion entirely, nor to become the same kind of ruthless, indiscriminate aggressor the Korathi themselves had proven to be at Haven's Reach. The goal was far more precise: to demonstrate, beyond any possible doubt, the true cost of underestimating humanity, while leaving enough of the Korathi Dominion intact to understand and remember that lesson clearly. Within minutes, the once proud Korathi home fleet found itself in complete disarray. Command vessels drifted helplessly, their systems disabled. Shipyard facilities burned uncontrollably in orbit. Defensive platforms lay in ruins, unable to offer any meaningful resistance. And throughout it all, the 6 ships of Task Force Quiet Resolve continued their calculated assault, moving with a speed and precision that left Korathi commanders desperately struggling just to understand what was happening, let alone mount any effective response. Aboard the Ashclaw, Dros Kalen watched his once invincible fleet crumble around him, disbelief and horror mixing together in his ancient mind. He thought back to the strange, calm human message received only a short time earlier, remembering clearly now the exact words it had used. Every human colony beyond Earth is watched, is protected, and is connected to systems capable of responding faster than most species believe possible. He had dismissed those words as bluff, as clever intimidation meant to frighten a species too proud and powerful to be truly threatened. Now, watching his fleet burn around him, he understood with terrible clarity exactly how wrong that assumption had been. "Marshal," Vessia said, her voice trembling as she turned toward him, "we are receiving another transmission. Origin, the same unidentified vessels currently attacking our fleet." Dros Kalen swallowed hard, dreading what he already suspected he was about to hear. "Play it," he said quietly. The same calm, steady voice from before filled the bridge once more, cutting cleanly through the chaos and destruction surrounding them. "This is Vice Admiral Marcus Cade of Earth Fleet Command, commanding Task Force Quiet Resolve. 3 hours ago, your fleet destroyed a human colony that posed no threat to you. You believed that colony to be defenseless, just as you clearly believed your own capital world to be untouchable. Both of these beliefs were mistaken." The bridge crew of the Ashclaw listened in stunned silence, their once proud confidence shattered completely by the events unfolding around them. "This attack is not intended to destroy the Korathi Dominion entirely," Cade's voice continued calmly. "It is intended to demonstrate clearly and unmistakably the true cost of attacking human colonies without provocation. We have deliberately limited our strikes to military targets alone, avoiding unnecessary civilian casualties, unlike the attack your forces carried out against Haven's Reach. This is not mercy born from weakness. It is restraint born from strength, strength we have chosen not to use to its fullest extent today." Dros Kalen listened silently, his mind struggling to process the sheer scale of what was happening. Never before had the Karathi Dominion faced an enemy capable of striking so precisely, so decisively, directly at the heart of their own power, while still choosing deliberate restraint rather than total annihilation. "We offer you this choice," Cade's voice concluded. "Withdraw all remaining forces from human territory immediately, and formally acknowledge responsibility for the destruction of Haven's Reach. In return, Earth will cease further military action against Karathi assets, beyond what has already occurred here today. Refuse, and we will consider this the beginning of a much larger and much more devastating conflict, one your Dominion is clearly unprepared to survive." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Ashclaw in heavy, uncertain silence. Around Korath Prime, the once mighty Karathi home fleet continued burning quietly in the darkness of space, a clear and undeniable testament to the terrible price of underestimating a species the galaxy had, until this very day, believed to be young, weak, and unworthy of true fear. Fleet Marshal Dros Kalen stood silently on the bridge of the Ashclaw for a long moment after Vice Admiral Cade's transmission ended. Around him, his officers waited nervously, unsure what their commander would decide, unsure even what options truly remained for a fleet as badly damaged as their own had become in mere minutes. Outside the viewports, fires still burned across the ruins of what had once been the most feared war fleet in this entire region of the galaxy. Debris drifted silently between the stars, remnants of ships that had never expected to face real combat, let alone lose so completely and so quickly. Dros Kalen thought carefully about everything that had happened. He thought about the calm, patient tone of both human messages he had received, the complete absence of anger or cruelty in their words, despite the devastating power clearly displayed through their actions. He thought about the careful restraint shown by the human attack itself, focused entirely on military targets, avoiding unnecessary destruction or civilian casualties, even while delivering a message that could not be ignored. And he thought, most of all, about the terrible mistake his own people had made in assuming that humanity's disguised vulnerability at Haven's Reach represented true weakness, rather than a carefully calculated trap. "Marshal," Vesia said quietly, breaking the heavy silence, "what are your orders?" Dros Kalen took a slow breath, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon him. He was, in this moment, deciding not just the fate of his own fleet, but potentially the future of the entire Karathi Dominion's relationship with a species they had gravely misunderstood. "Open a channel to Vice Admiral Cade," he said finally, his voice heavy but steady. Tell him the Karathi Dominion formally acknowledges responsibility for the attack on Haven's Reach. Tell him we agree to his terms. All Karathi forces will withdraw immediately from any territory claimed by Earth." Vesia nodded quickly, relief clear in her expression, as she moved to establish the requested communication. Aboard the Warden's Oath, Vice Admiral Cade received the Karathi surrender with quiet, professional satisfaction, rather than triumphant celebration. He understood clearly that this moment was not truly a victory to celebrate, but rather a grim necessity, one born from the tragic loss of 40,000 innocent lives at Haven's Reach. No formal agreement, no matter how thorough, could ever truly restore what had been lost. "Order all ships to cease offensive action immediately," Cade commanded calmly. "Maintain defensive positions until Karathi withdrawal is fully confirmed." Over the following hours, the remaining vessels of the Karathi home fleet began their slow, careful withdrawal from the space surrounding Korath Prime, moving cautiously away from the 6 human ships that had, in the span of only a few devastating minutes, completely shattered their people's confidence in their own supposed invincibility. News of what had happened at Korath Prime spread rapidly throughout this region of the galaxy in the days that followed. Other species, some who had long feared eventual conflict with the aggressive Karathi Dominion, listened closely to reports describing the unexpected human counterattack. Diplomatic channels across dozens of star systems buzzed with quiet, careful conversations about this young species called humanity, previously dismissed by many as inexperienced newcomers to interstellar politics, now suddenly understood in a very different light. Back on Earth, Admiral Renata Voss received the full report of Operation Silent Answer, with quiet, complicated emotions. She felt no joy at the destruction inflicted upon the Karathi fleet, understanding fully that such destruction, however necessary, still represented violence and loss of life, even among an aggressor as ruthless as the Karathi had proven themselves to be. But she also felt a heavy, solemn sense of duty fulfilled, knowing that her carefully designed doctrine had succeeded in protecting countless future human colonies from suffering the same tragic fate as Haven's Reach. She thought often, in the weeks that followed, about Governor Talia Reyes and the 40,000 colonists who had died simply because a proud, aggressive species had assumed weakness where none truly existed. Their deaths could never be undone, no matter how thoroughly Earth's response had demonstrated humanity's true capabilities. But their sacrifice, however tragic and unwilling, had helped teach a lesson that would likely save countless other human lives in the years to come. A formal memorial was eventually built near Earth Fleet Command's headquarters, honoring the colonists of Haven's Reach. Governor Reyes's final recorded message, describing her colony's confusion and fear in its last moments, was preserved carefully within Earth's historical archives, a permanent reminder of both the terrible cost of underestimation and the equally terrible cost of allowing such tragedies to happen at all, even as part of a carefully calculated strategy. Months later, formal diplomatic relations slowly began to develop between Earth and the Karathi Dominion, guided carefully by both Admiral Voss and, somewhat surprisingly to many humans, Fleet Marshal Dros Kalin himself. Having witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of underestimating humanity, Dros Kalin became one of the strongest voices within Karathi leadership, advocating for careful, respectful relations with Earth going forward, rather than renewed aggression or hostility. "We believed strength was simply about visible power," Dros Kalin admitted quietly, during one of the early diplomatic meetings between Karathi and human representatives. "We never considered that true strength might also include patience, careful preparation, and quiet, calculated restraint. Humanity taught us this lesson at a terrible cost, one we deeply regret causing in the first place." Admiral Voss listened carefully to these words, understanding clearly the complicated mixture of guilt, respect, and hard-earned wisdom behind them. "Strength without wisdom leads only to tragedy," she replied simply. "We hope, moving forward, both our peoples can build something better from the painful lessons learned here." As the months turned slowly into years, humanity's reputation throughout this region of the galaxy shifted dramatically. No longer dismissed as young, inexperienced newcomers unworthy of serious consideration, humans became widely recognized and carefully respected as a species whose quiet, unassuming appearance often disguised remarkable strength, patience, and strategic brilliance. Other aggressive species, previously eager to test the limits of human territory, grew notably more cautious, remembering clearly the fate that had befallen the once proud Karathi home fleet. Back on the rebuilt colony world that would eventually rise again on Talos 9, a new settlement slowly began to grow from the ashes of Haven's Reach. Unlike before, this new colony openly displayed visible defenses, a deliberate choice made by Earth Fleet Command as a way of honoring those who had died in the original tragedy, ensuring their sacrifice would never be forgotten or repeated in quite the same way. A small memorial garden was built near the center of the new settlement, filled with quiet, simple markers honoring each of the 40,000 colonists who had lost their lives in the original attack. Visitors to this garden, both human and increasingly, over time, occasional Karathi diplomats, seeking better understanding between their peoples, often paused to read a simple inscription carved into a central stone marker, quoting the final recorded words of Governor Talia Reyes. "Tell Earth we did not start this. Tell them who did this to us." Beneath these words, a second inscription had been added years later, reflecting the hard-earned wisdom gained from the tragic events that had unfolded that day. It read simply, "Let this place remind us that peace, once broken, carries a heavy cost for all who break it, and an equally heavy responsibility for those who must respond." Admiral Renata Voss visited this memorial personally, many years later, long after her retirement from active command. She stood quietly among the simple stone markers, remembering clearly the difficult decisions she had made, the painful cost accepted in pursuit of long-term safety and stability for humanity's future among the stars. She thought about Vice Admiral Cade, about Fleet Marshal Dros Kalin, about the strange, complicated path that had led two very different species toward eventual understanding and respect, born from tragedy, but ultimately strengthened through shared wisdom and careful diplomacy. As she turned to leave the quiet memorial garden, she paused briefly, looking up at the clear, peaceful sky above the rebuilt colony, the same sky that had once witnessed unimaginable tragedy and destruction. She thought quietly to herself about the strange nature of strength, about how true power often lay not in loud displays of aggression, but in quiet patience, careful preparation, and the wisdom to know exactly when and how to respond. Humanity, she realized, had learned this lesson through centuries of painful history on their own world, long before ever reaching the stars. And now, thanks to the events at Haven's Reach and Korath Prime, other species throughout the galaxy were beginning to learn it too, understanding at last that the quiet, unassuming nature of humanity's colonies was never truly weakness. It was simply the calm before an answer, patient and certain, waiting quietly to be given.